Hello, and welcome to another teaching by 119 Ministries. Our ministry teaches that the whole Bible is still true and directly relevant in our lives. If you would like to know more on what we believe and teach, please visit us at testeverything.net. We hope that you enjoy studying and testing the following teaching. Peer pressure, something that is generally accepted as only being a part of a teenager's life. But is that really true? No, it's not. If someone were to ask you if you were to give in to peer pressure, what would your answer be? Most would respond with an overwhelming no. But all too often, we see people keeping up with the Joneses out of peer pressure. All too often, we see people wanting to be accepted with a particular group in the neighborhood, at work, or even church, out of peer pressure. Peer pressure can be a good thing or a dangerous thing. It truly depends on who you make a part of your life. Consider 1 Corinthians 15. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Do those in your life influence you toward a holy lifestyle in the Word of God or in the ways of the world? The wrong people can influence your life instead of the Spirit if you allow them to. Consider Pilate. Matthew 27. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Yeshua executed. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Yeshua, who is called Christ?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." Pilate gave in to the crowds around him. In so doing, he allowed the crucifixion of Yeshua. How about you? Do you crucify Yeshua when you give in to peer pressure? Everyone has different kinds of peer pressure. Where does your peer pressure lead you? Are you willing to stand up against it if needed? In the book of Daniel, we find 3 Hebrew brothers who were told to bow down and worship when the music plays. Yet, they stood strong in the midst of their peers, even though death was on the line. As I've once heard it said, if you can't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything. So, in the question of falling to peer pressure, the answer is determined in what you are standing for, or if you're standing at all. As Isaiah 7:9 concludes with, "If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all." How is your stand in the Word today? Do you allow others to determine how you live or even what you believe? Don't fall to peer pressure anymore. 1 Corinthians 16. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be men of courage. Be strong. Consider even the words of David to his son Solomon. "I am about to go the way of all the earth," he said. "So be strong, show yourself a man, and observe what Yahweh, your God, requires. Walk in his ways, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and requirements, as written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all you do, and wherever you go." In other words, man up. No excuses. Follow the ways of God and be a real man. And he did, at first. But later we find he began giving in to the peer pressure of those around him, those whom he brought in to his life. Are you giving in to the wrong influences in your life? Maybe it's time for you to man up. 1 Kings chapter 2. And observe what Yahweh, your God, requires. Walk in his ways and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and requirements, as written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go. We hope you've enjoyed this brief message. Remember, continue to test everything. Shalom.
It is because of you, our generous supporters, who make it possible to offer these high-quality teachings completely free of charge. If you feel led to support 119 Ministries so that we can continue this effort, please visit testeverything.net and click on the Support 119 tab. Learn how you can partner with us to take the whole Word of God to the nations. The Apostle Paul, a proclaimed Pharisee turned champion of the faith, writing 13 letters which would later become the pillars of Christian doctrine. Millions today use Paul to teach the changing of the law of God, despite the fact that other scriptures declare something quite contrary to the common interpretations of his writings. King David tells us that the law of God is freedom. But many believe Paul said the law of God is slavery. But Paul also said that we should follow the law of God. And he said that he delights in the law of God. But he also said that we are not under the law. This may be completely new to you. You may have never considered any of this. Welcome to the Pauline Paradox, a modern theological reality in which many turn a blind eye. We confront this paradox head-on and seek, once and for all, to understand the true Hebraic context in which his words were originally authored, to bring reconciliation to his words, regardless of the depth of this challenge. We discover that Paul stated that he followed the whole law of God and even taught the law of God. We show how Peter, a person who knew Paul better than any today, warned us of how Paul's writings regarding the law were difficult to understand, and how his words are misunderstood easily. If one did not know the Old Testament well enough, even 2,000 years ago, Peter warned that misunderstanding Paul would cause one to break the law of God in ignorance. We find that even in the first century, Paul was constantly falsely accused of not keeping the law of God. We even see James defending Paul, proving that Paul kept and taught the law of God. This is all in the Bible. One of the keys to unlocking the context of Paul's letters is to have a proper understanding of the debates of the first century. In this series, we will cross-reference several passages to reveal the ongoing dialogue which occurred between the parties involved. We show how Paul was constantly accused of not teaching the whole law of God, and when he was confronted with such accusations, he always claimed to follow and teach the whole law of God, even to the point of paying for sacrifices at the temple to prove such accusations to be false. Does this all sound too crazy to be true? We implore you to test everything, to challenge your faith and seek truth, not tradition. The first teaching in the Pauline Paradox series is titled, Is the Majority Ever Wrong? We address the first mental barrier, which is a misplaced confidence in the self-professed doctrinal experts who claim to understand Paul's words. Then, in the teaching, The Paul You Never Knew, we reveal words of Paul that many never see, the real Paul, the Paul that kept and taught the whole law of God. Following that, we detail in the teaching, why is Paul so difficult to understand? The root cause of why so many misunderstand Paul. This then leads us into the teaching, Which Law Paul? Which, to the surprise of many, exposes the fact that Paul was not always just talking about the law of God when he spoke of the law. In fact, Paul mentions at least 7 laws: the law of God, the law of sin and death, the law of the Spirit of life, the law of faith, the law of righteousness, the law of Christ. What are all these laws, and how do they relate to one another? More importantly, how does it help us understand Paul's letters in respect to the law of God, to help us avoid the error of the lawless that Peter warns us about in reading Paul's letters? It is in that we then, verse by verse, dive deep into Romans, Galatians, Ephesians, and more to solve and reconcile the Pauline paradox once and for all. We make it available to you in one series so you can test all of this yourself to the unchanging Word of God. For more free information, including these free video teachings, please visit us at testeverything.net.